welcome everybody to the September EAC meeting. We've got a packed agenda, so we're going to get started right away. First of all, before we do anything, I want to recognize Margie Reinhardt, who's our newest member. Welcome. We're excited to have you, and if we have a little time at the end, we'll ask you to give a quick introduction on yourself.
Okay.
Steve, do you want to jump up and...
Sure, thank you. I'm Steve Orsini, I'm your township engineer. Bob Zinkowski, the township manager, asked me to just speak to you for a moment. So Bob Zinkowski came to me and he said, you know, our EAC is loaded with talent, and they're loaded with wanting to do good and do projects in the township. Meliora Design has been awarded by our Board of Commissioners a multitude of stormwater management projects. North Wayne flood mitigation reduction, South Wayne flood reduction, South Wayne parking lot for stormwater management, and a bunch more. They did our PRP plan last year. They're doing our MS4 application this year. PRP plan being our pollution reduction plan. From that pollution reduction plan, other projects came about, basin retrofits, and to say the least. So the manager said, Steve, get Meliora in front of the EAC. We know they have the talent, we know they have the want to do projects, and let Michelle and her team present things to you to get your input, to see where the EAC and some of these projects may meld together, and we could work together on some things and take advantage of your talent and the time you want to input. So I thank you very much. I now introduce Michelle Adams from Meliora Design.
Thank you, Steve. As Steve mentioned, there's a number of projects, and I've listed them here, most with a water component to them. And I can run through what they are quickly. There's a couple that I think would really benefit from EAC input or thought. The basin retrofits especially comes to mind because that's something that the township will have to be undertaking for the MS4 permit, the pollution reduction plan. And also, so a few things on the Skunk Hollow Trail and Harford Trail especially. So let me share with you what these are. So these are a list of some of the projects. So starting with the Skunk Hollow sewer repair. I think you're familiar with the Skunk Hollow area. I understand Steve said there's work been done by the EAC out there. So this is the trails as they were laid out by Natural Lands originally. So we're about halfway in the design process for the trail. And coinciding with that, as you probably know, so we're through, the survey's been done, the wetlands mapped, a line and grade plan has been done, and there's a number of bridge crossings. But coincident to that, in the Skunk Hollow area, there was also the sewer line break. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that happening last year. The sewer broke. So this is the emergency repair. So you can see that that's what's out there, and a line has been cut through the trees for that emergency repair. So right now we're at the point, about 2 weeks ago we got guidance from the township in terms of the bridges. And they want the bridges to be big enough to carry public works vehicles so they can get up and down the trail for maintenance purposes. So in that context, we're looking to finessing the location of the trail and the location of the sewer. We're trying to stay where things have already been cut and disturbed. We think there's a number of invasives out there, so one of the next steps is having the arborist come out and look and tell us what's invasive, what's native, etc. But input on the alignment of the trail in these especially sensitive areas, I think would be helpful, because we're trying to balance, you know, there's the existing sewer has some topography issues and grades. We're trying to balance cost-effective sewer and trail with minimizing disturbance and preserving what's special about these areas. So that's hard. In that same line of thought, the Harford Park Trail, if anyone's familiar with it, the Harford Park Trail is intended to get people from Radnor Elementary School and the train station. They get off the train, and right now they're walking through the elementary school and along this existing driveway up there. They're kind of following a path up there. And some new houses have been built by Bentley, and so using that driveway is no longer an option. So the township's looking at putting a soft trail. It's only about 1,400 feet long, where that orange line is, between the existing office park and the homes that have been built to move people back and forth safely. We've laid out the trail, line and grade. There's a lot of trees, but when we got out there with the arborist, they're mostly Norway maples. So there's the proposed trail. So there's going to be this balance of removing trees and communicating to the users, especially people who think they're taking a nice walk in the woods, about the Norway maples and what's planted. So that's another design that, as it's refined, would benefit from input as well as communication to the public about invasives and natives. And I know there's the Shade Tree Commission, but this is I feel like it's got an ecological component with the invasives. We just had an opening for a project at the Schuylkill Center today, and they opened the trail. They actually took a big, long invasive vine for their ribbon cutting. So instead of cutting a ribbon, they cut a big, long invasive vine. So those kinds of things that help the public know what's going on with the trails. There's some sidewalk feasibility studies. There's nothing particularly interesting about those from an environmental perspective. But I would like to talk to you about the MS4 and the basin retrofits. And are folks familiar with last year's pollution reduction plan and the MS4? Okay, let me give you a quick overview. This is from last year's presentation to the Board of Commissioners. So a number of municipalities in Pennsylvania of a certain density are required to do pollution reduction plans because they have NPDES permits because their streams are impaired. They're not meeting their designated uses, including the Radnor streams. And you can see there's basically 3 major watersheds. The Darby's most of it, and then in the northern part, drainage goes off to the Schuylkill River, and there's a little piece down here that goes to Cobb's Creek. I'm sorry, over here to Cobb's Creek, I think. And you can see your streams are almost completely red. So in last year's MS4 NPDES program, the townships had to submit their permit application. DEP basically changed the rules. You now have to, and Dan can tell you more about this too when I'm done, but you basically now have to do a pollution reduction plan. And what that means is the township had to assess all the land uses that go to the municipal storm sewers, anything that goes in the pipes. And you had to assess how much pollution was coming off of those land uses. So it's a big accounting exercise to estimate. And then you have to identify specific projects that are going to reduce the pollutant load of sediment by 10% over the next 5 years. So by the next term your permit comes around, 5 years from 2017, the township will have to have implemented a bunch of projects that meet these requirements according to the permit. This is, I know that's a busy table, but basically when you do the math, the township has about 3 million pounds of sediment per year, and so you've got about 300,000 pounds of sediment you need to remove in that time period. And DEP, and that's just the storm sewer areas. So the next step is specific projects and locations, and one of the DEP's put forward different methods, especially stream channel restoration and water quality improvement through things like basin retrofit. So you can take existing detention basins and you can plant them and naturalize them. That gives you some credit. You can modify the control structures in those basins to hold water, and that gives you more credit. So in areas of the township that have basins, that's really low-hanging fruit because this is cost-effective. It can engage the community. You can also do retrofit projects and stream channel restoration. And we think the stream channel restoration is going to be beneficial in some of the areas that are suffering from flooding. It's not going to solve all the problems, but so I'm just going to share a presentation. This is from a basin that was retrofit back in 2006, Intradifferent, when Steve was at Tradifferent. It was led by Trout Unlimited. A number of you, I'm sure you're familiar with Trout Unlimited and the work they do. So this was an existing about 2.5 acre mowed detention basin in a residential community. There were 1 acre lots, and the township was mowing it pretty much every week. Water came in, water went out, and it was designed just for the big storms. So when water came in, it just came through this big mowed area and out this old rusty pipe, and there were holes right at the bottom, so water went right out. So that was the existing condition. So what happened to retrofit it, there's where the basin is in the neighborhood. You can see what the neighborhood's like. And it was on limestone, very shallow, right on the rock. So they put the water in the lowest spot, right on the rock. So we wanted to have the basin hold more water, so that we wanted to modify the structure. But the township engineer was worried that if we made changes, we would lose the capacity of the basin to do that. So basically, what we did is we modified the outlet. We put in a series of berms and grading to sort of create a tortuous path for the water so it's in contact with the vegetation longer, and to slow down the velocity. Then we modified the outlet structure, and then we were going to, build little mounds to make this tortuous path, but so we didn't lose volume in the basin. We ended up sort of making new low spots and new high spots, and also taking some soil out of the edges of the basin so that we would have this additional volume we needed and create this flow path. So I'm just sharing this because this is an example of what's involved in a basin retrofit. We used very inexpensive materials, whips and small, very small trees that are cost effective. This whole thing went in for under $60,000. There it is under construction. You can see these are just little cuttings of the willows that go along stream bank stabilization. The outlet was modified, and it was planted by volunteers and maintained by volunteers. And a maintenance plan, because it takes about 3 years for these things to establish. And there's important communication with people while they're establishing so that they don't get upset about the vines and the invasives. So there it is the first year, the second year. As things are growing in, you can see areas where water ponded, things that come up in these basin retrofits are people being concerned about standing water, especially if they can see it. So these kinds of communication, recommendation, and also control of invasives. They had to have a management plan because invasives were, a battle for the first 3 years. So that was all done by volunteers. So we see this as an opportunity for volunteers. Yeah.
Well, since the idea here is to redo a basin, but to reduce sediment outflow, doesn't that shorten the life of the basin?
It is, and so there's maintenance that's associated with. So when the water comes in, there's a depressed area, a little stilling area, so that sediment can settle. Maintenance crews, public works guys can get in, keep it clean. Yeah, exactly. So within several years, it had grown in. We thought it looked great. There's my friend and Dan's friend Tavis out in the middle of the basin that had all been lawn before. And we thought, great. And that's when we got the phone call because public works guys were spending hours out here, the township said. And when we went out to visit them and ask about it, we found that they were carefully weed whacking and clipping like it was Longwood Gardens. And we said, mow it down twice a year. So this idea of how these naturalized landscapes evolve is important. Just some pictures, measures of success in terms of the community wanting birds, wildlife, places to sit. Really important things are the mowed edge and post and rail fence, so people feel like it's intentional. They know it's not just something growing up wild. Those are some photos from 2017. It had really grown in by then. And there's the photo, the aerials from what it was and what it became. So in Radnor Township, in last year's PRP plan, a number of basins were identified as potential retrofits, and they've been narrowed down to this list here, and they're the days. So we're planning to go visit these basins once the leaves drop, November, early December, when everything clears up and we can get into them, because a lot of them are pretty overgrown. So we'll be communicating with the homeowners associations and going out to visit these. And I know Steve was welcoming any input or anyone who wants to participate in visiting these and making decisions. And then we'll have to be communicating with the homeowners associations about how these things work, what they look like, the transition from construction to final maintenance. So this was something specific that Steve had mentioned that the EAC could potentially provide good input and advice on. So, any questions on, yeah?
This list of the detention basins here, are they all typically that same mode variety?
Some are overgrown. A number of them are overgrown now. They haven't all been consistently mowed, so we can't get into some of them because they're so thick.
So do you get, is the credit you get from the state, is that based on the beginning state of the basin and the end state, or is it scaled if it?
It's got a formula.
Okay.
The state has a formula, depending if you simply plant it and naturalize it, or if you modify it so that it's actually holding some volume. So the one in Sidley Basin, the outlet structure was modified so that the first inch of runoff from the drainage area doesn't drain out that hole. It soaks in, the plants take it up, the vegetation grew in, it's not been a problem. the vegetation is such that where the water's depressed, nobody can see it now, so nobody, and now the community, Trout Unlimited tells me, has sort of forgotten that it was ever different. Like, this is what they know, you know, so. And the township does maintain the fence around it, they mow the edges, that kind of thing. So these are the most cost-effective things the township can do to meet their PRP requirements where basins exist. So these are high on the list. So this is one of the things we're working on, and
is that high on the list mainly from like a cost benefit statement, or is it also
Totally
just because
cost.
like there's no like other parties to deal with because it's township land anyway?
it's not all township land. Some of them,
Oh.
a number of them are on homeowner associations. So communicating with the homeowners associations, you know, engaging the neighbors, is all that stuff that needs to happen before these move into. So we're moving through design and engagement and assessment, but you know, before construction. But these are very cost effective.
And the purpose is primarily
Stand behind this.
the purpose is primarily to prevent the particulates and sediment travel. right?
Exactly.
Does it
Exactly.
provide any relief to like flooding in
It
areas?
certainly can, and they can be designed to capture, you know, that first part of the rainfall and hold it so that that part is not going downstream when it rains. Yeah, so it can they can definitely help with flooding.
So would that be taken into consideration if you're looking at these, if they happen to be somewhere that they could be used, designed in a way to alleviate localized flooding?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, it's beneficial. The problem we have in Radnor is that a lot of the worst flooding areas are in the older developed areas where there are no basins, because you know, they long predate requirements for basins. A lot of these basins were built 80s, 90s. They're about that vintage. So.
In terms of sort of the effort involved in doing this, you talked a little bit about volunteer work. Does the township have resources to do all of these, or half of them unless we come up with volunteer help, or how does that work?
That's a question for Steve, but I don't believe they've put construction cost in a specific budget yet. We've provided construction estimates, initial ones, as part of the PRP. As part of this phase, when we have a chance to assess them and do the designs, we'll come up with better construction numbers. But I don't believe there's a solid, you know, budget allotment yet.
Do you have a ballpark number?
We did, and if I go back, and they're not terribly expensive. Like the Sidley one,
You said
that was done for about
that was
60.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's a single basin.
it was a big one. It was a big basin.
2
A lot of
acres.
planting. Yeah, a lot of planting. So I think there were some numbers in the PRP table if I go back.
Where did the volunteers come from? Were they in that specific neighborhood?
No, I don't have the construction cost in here. Sorry.
Yeah, I
but
was
we
kind of
have-
wondering that same thing.
Yeah,
sorry.
Township volunteers, Trout Unlimited volunteers, the Trout Unlimited folks for the Sidley Basin have. We've also done some for Peck, and they've like engaged the local community around them with the idea that if people are part of it, they, you know, accept it, take care of it, etc. We've also focused on opportunities to do plantings and do things for bird habitat, pollinator habitat, have places for people to watch at the basins. That's usually popular. That often draws people in if you have any birders or people interested in pollinators. Yeah, you know, what things are important to the community. Or do they want it to look like Longwood Gardens? Because you can also design a basin retrofit that is naturalized, but it's much more homogeneous in its plantings, and I don't know. So,
Interesting.
yeah, community really matters. We find at nursing homes there's an interesting shift between like the old who are like the, you know, hippies and such are more, want things more naturalized, and then you have a generation that likes things very manicured. Like it's interesting to see how perspectives on nature change over generations. So
That's cool.
yeah. So that's the basins. Any other thoughts, questions? I'm welcome to emails if people have thoughts and want to follow up with
Thank you,
anything.
that'd be really
Yeah.
helpful. I think this is great.
Is it possible to get a copy of the presentation?
Yes, I think she put it on the drive, and I have a flash drive. I can email.
That'd be great if you, I can exchange emails with you
Yeah.
afterwards if you want.
Perfect. I can
Great.
put
Thank
it
you,
in the
Michelle.
Dropbox. Yeah. Is that 20 minutes? You wanna
That
stop
is
there?
20 minutes,
Okay.
and you know, I think we've done our questions throughout, so if you want a couple more minutes to wrap up.
I have some stuff on the flooding in Wayne, but
Okay.
that's a lot of information, and I can do a couple quick slides if you want, or we can talk
I would
about
like to
it
hear
another
that,
night.
please, yeah, if you don't
Okay.
mind, if you could do a
Sure.
quick recap. The big question in my mind with the flooding stuff, and I don't know if I echo others here or not, but I sort of wonder, even if we spent all the money that's in the stormwater budget, would it make a dent? And, you know, sort of how far are we from being able to get things under control?
There's a lot of water.
There sure is.
Yes, a lot of water. So, CH2 did a lot of good groundwork with the GIS, with the mapping and the piping, setting up a model. We've taken their model and sort of combined some of the sub areas, and we've also updated it. It turns out when we look at, if you look at things topographically, the drainage areas were right. The Tredyffrin has 140 acres that is actually bucking the grade and is piped this way. So there's 140 more acres than we even thought. So we focused on taking the modeling and the sub areas and looking at where there's been incident reports, where there has been flooding, including most recently the flooding in August 18th. So this is the modeling from the August 18th flooding, where we got a tremendous amount of rain in a very short period. And what we're seeing with the modeling, building off of what had already been done, is that it's not so much the big storms, it's the really intense rainfalls, because a couple things happen. Inlets get clogged, there's low curbs or limited curbs, and water jumps and goes other places, and the system just can't handle that intensity because it's so impervious, and there's no stormwater management basin type things except for the West Wayne Basin, that it's the high intensity rainfall. So you could have, we looked at things like hurricanes that didn't cause that much trouble. It all goes south when you get, 1.5 inches in, a very short period of time. Yeah, so we've been looking at how much water and where is it coming from in the storms. And we've also been doing that for the Midland flood analysis. And going back to this one, we first looked at if we could restore more of a riparian buffer, would that do it? And we think that's an important part because there's no opportunity for water to flood where you want it to flood along the creek. It floods where we don't want it to flood. So could we do more of a riparian buffer? And we can make things better, but it's not enough. So we've started to quantify what kind of projects, and certainly green infrastructure and retrofits, certainly things in Tredyffrin. But also we've been talking about, when we met with the community, water comes down some of these streets, jumps the curb, and forms giant puddles in backyards, but it's not doing any damage. So could there be places when it rains really hard where we intentionally have a puddle for an hour or two where it's not a threat to homes and it's not a threat to the police getting through? So we've been looking at the topography and seeing, in addition to the green infrastructure retrofits, encouraging people who want to do rain gardens, and rain gardens are great, but it's a big area with a lot of houses. We won't get there fast. We're going to need a lot of opportunities. So localized areas, where we've let it flood intentionally, green infrastructure improvements both in this area and up in Tredyffrin, and floodplain improvements, so you get that storage along the channel where you want it to. And there could be some houses that, we're going to have challenges. It's a lot to do. These houses down here, which is the area that was once the ice pond.
Can you point out at least one landmark that I recognize? I know
Oh,
what
I'm
I'm
sorry.
looking at.
I'm so sorry. That's terrible. I combined these slides. So this is Wayne down here, coming down into Wayne, right? This is the Wayne Basin. This is.
Is that Lancaster Avenue?
Where's the middle school?
This is the train. The middle school's down here, and that's
Okay.
on the next slide. So this is North Wayne.
So that's
library.
the train. Oh, I see.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
This is the train tracks, Wayne.
That's Wayne
West-
Station there, right?
Gotcha.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That helps, yeah, I'm glad you asked.
Sorry. I combined slides and I took out the where
That's
are
fine.
we
I'm
slides.
just trying to put this in perspective here.
Yes. So, and these folks, we have videos of So there's area from down here that comes under the train tracks, combines with what's in the basin, everything up here, and then all combines right there, and everybody gets underwater. And the concern we've heard from the residents is, you know, emergency vehicles can't get through, they can't get through. And that was also seen, it's North Wayne. And then this is South Wayne. So here's Lancaster Avenue, Middle School, Wayne Avenue. So this is South Wayne. This one is a huge challenge because it's very dense. There's no stormwater management really. Everything is in pipes. This was once a stream that was buried. So there was once a stream where the middle school went. It doesn't daylight till down here. The tributaries came up that way. There's a big storage system under the school, which we understand hasn't been fully utilized. They haven't been able to collect the stormwater into it. So part of our charge is to get water into that, as well as making improvements along, you know, where the fire station is and the parking lot by the library. But I'm glad you asked the question because it's a lot of water and there aren't easy answers.
A lot of water.
Yeah, so this, you can see that was what happened in August. And that was, what was interesting is they got 0.71 inches in 15 minutes, and we're really lucky because there's a weather gauge of 15-minute data now over at Villanova.
Oh, wow.
It's been in place for a few years. So with good rainfall data, we can see what's happening locally.
Yeah, the civil engineering company I'm working for now are doing a project at Cabrini, and they had a gauge there, on that day, they got 6.5 inches in about 2 hours.
Wow.
I mean, that's like close to a 100-year, 24-hour storm happening
Yeah.
in 2 hours.
And when we run the model, it's this high intensity that,
Yeah.
you know, if it could be like 6 inches, but if it just kind of rains steady,
Yeah.
everything runs. But when it rains hard like that, pipes can't carry it, water can't get in the inlets, the whole system kind of falls apart.
I'll give you one more factoid from Cabrini is, so our area gets typically like 45 inches of rain a year.
Yeah, although they're raising that
And
now.
since, what's that?
It's going up.
Oh, yeah. But since in July, August, until about 3 days ago, we've gotten 39 inches. So in 2.5 months, we've almost gotten what we usually get in a year.
So we're not imagining it.
No.
Good to know.
We'll train for the last 3 weeks. So.
Yeah, that's been unbelievable.
So I'll stop there.
That's great. Thank you very much,
Thank
Michelle.
you.
This is
Thank you
really
for having
helpful,
me.
and I look forward to kind of continuing this discussion. I think it's going to come up again.
Yeah, I'm giving my card, and I'll send this PowerPoint.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll switch gears, and Bob from Curb My Clutter is going to join us. Yeah, the sun came out today, and I was like, oh my God, what is that thing?
Yeah, I was finished eating my breakfast. My wife was getting ready for work, and I came into the bedroom, and I said, "Oh, honey, look outside! Look outside! It's the sun!
It's the sun. It's still there.
One slightly doggier card as an
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll send you a note.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
What were you using to change slides?"
I was just pushing the arrow
Okay.
key.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, particularly on short notice. I always like to tell people a little bit about my background and myself. I've been in the solid waste and recycling industry for over 30 years. I spent my first 19 years with Allied BFI, and during that period I had done some mergers and acquisitions work, actually 35 years. Did mergers and acquisitions work, mostly in the Philadelphia area, but then up and down the East Coast. In 2005, the industry really moved away from growth through acquisition, so I looked for my next opportunity. And at that point, recycling single stream was really taking off, and I saw an opportunity to jump into the paper bottles and cans. So I joined a company that was called Recommunity, and I spent my last 12 years with them. And we grew that region from, we were collecting maybe 150,000 tons a year up to 550,000 tons a year. And so we did the city of Philadelphia, state of Delaware, Camden County, a lot of projects throughout the Philadelphia region. As you're probably aware, with green fence and some of the challenges that are behind paper bottles and cans today, I started looking for a new opportunity, and some friends of mine that I've known for a number of years approached me about Curb My Clutter. Curb My Clutter is a new company, and we're specifically trying to tackle some issues that most people aren't aware of. Today, households are full of sequestered assets, and our idea is to try to return those products back into the circular economy. And the impacts are pretty dramatic. Electronics and apparel make up about 10% of the waste stream, but electronics are only 1 to 2%. The rest is clothing. And so, most people just assume that all clothing is donated. But the reality is that 85% of it is going into landfills. The impact of that is municipalities are spending over $500 million a year to put this stuff in a landfill, and it does have value. It needs to get back into the circular economy. The value of this material is worth billions of dollars. I saw a statistic where you can mine more gold out of a ton of ore, or a ton of cell phones will yield more gold than a ton of ore. So it's pretty dramatic when you sit back and you say, okay, what does it cost us to mine each of the two streams? And of course, the improper disposal of electronics is, a huge environmental issue. We talk about clothing. It's a growing problem. In that, and there's a couple of things going on. As you pull more and more material out of the waste stream in paper bottles and cans and other recyclables, stuff that's left in becomes a larger percentage just by math. So that's one growth, but the other growth is fast fashion. So today, older generations we wear clothing much longer, right? But younger generations, they're only wearing an article of clothing a half a dozen times, and then they're done with it. So in 2000, it was only about 3.9% of the waste stream. The latest data that we have is 2014. It was 6.2% of the waste stream. So we've seen a fairly dramatic growth. If we look at it today, when you look at, say, the city of Philadelphia, they did a waste characterization study in 2017. When you add clothing and leather together, it's over 7% of the waste stream. So that really points to what the problem is. This graph represents this large gray line represent what goes into landfill in terms of clothing. The red line represents what goes into incinerator, and then this little green line up top represents what actually makes it into the donation market. So the donation market is broken in that it's not able to capture the amount of or address the degree of the problem. And one of the reasons we believe that's the case is convenience drives diversion. So I always like to talk to people about, if you go back to the early days of recycling paper bottles and cans, it was all done by drop-off. There was no curbside collection when we started recycling. I use the state of Delaware as an example because I'm intimately familiar with it, but also it illustrates what I think part of the problem is. As late as the year 2000, the entire state of Delaware, their paper bottles and cans were all collected via drop-off. So residents had to take their paper bottles and cans to some public drop-off center. That earned them the honor of being like the 48th or 49th worst recycling state in the union. So in 2016, the state legislature passes universal recycling law, which requires every hauler to put a curbside cart to every resident in Delaware. Being Delaware, they have to have the cart, but they don't have to recycle, which I always thought was kind of funny. The results are When I was with Community Recycling, we negotiated a 20-year deal, built a $16 million facility to service the state. So in 2000, they were generating about 15,000 tons a year of paper bottles and cans. My last full year with Community, which was in 2016, they were doing 90,000 tons a year. So by virtue of making recycling convenient, it captured a lot of the folks who otherwise weren't recycling. Now, clearly, I'm not suggesting that we're going to see similar types of volumes in this program. But if you use the city of Philadelphia as an example, they generate over 500,000 tons a year of solid waste. If 7% of that is clothing and leather products, that's 35,000 tons a year. Those are very substantial numbers. So what we've done is the challenges, and the reason that nobody has really approached a curbside collection of clothing and electronics in the past is it's event driven. It's not like you can drive a truck past a house every single week like we do for paper bottles and cans. And to give you another example is today your paper bottles and cans are worth in the range of $20 to $50 a ton. That's pre-processing. So today many communities are paying as much as $85 a ton to recycle paper bottles and cans. Contrast that against clothing, it has a value of $700 a ton. On its best day, paper bottles and cans had a value of about $150 a ton. So there's significant value there in the clothing that we're putting into landfills. So what we've done is created a software package where simply by texting the word pickup, you can schedule a collection for your clothing and electronics. And I must have skipped over a slide here because there was one thing I wanted to. You know what? I pulled the wrong presentation. I had a video for Gloucester Township, which is one of our customers, that kind of gives an overview of the program.
So can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
When you say you text pickup, that's at the individual homeowner level.
Yeah.
So you don't technically need even buy-in from the township, do you?
Well, technically we don't.
Right.
Technically we could roll this program out, but what we found is that there's a couple of reasons to partner with the community. Number one, we believe that the value of community in helping us to promote the program brings value in terms of being able to harvest this material. If you're doing your own collection, the township then benefits by having disposal avoidance, because every ton that we pull out of the waste stream is value to the community. And also it's an additional service that you can promote to your constituency and say, hey, look, we've got this service to offer convenient curbside collection of electronics and clothing. When you think about electronics, for most communities is a drop-off event that happens like once, twice a year.
Yeah, it's really hard to get rid of your electronics. If you're away that day, then you're out of luck.
It becomes a major problem.
And
And
those
then
things don't even take like the big old TVs. They say you don't bring them, or you have to pay
Yeah,
$50
it's
or
really,
something. You know.
it's really difficult.
So through our software package, you can basically, on demand, it's your own rainy day, you decide you want to clean your closet out. You can clean your closet out, and then, rather than run to a drop-off or wait for electronics drop-off, you can pick up your smartphone and you can text the word pickup, and we walk you through a registration process in order to get you a collection. When you think about the scope of the problem, one of the slides that are missing, which the missing slides are in here, which I'm going to give to you. There are 35 billion pounds of clothing a year discarded in America. The donation system or 32 billion. The donation system collects 5 billion of it. So that means 27 billion pounds of clothing a year are going into landfills. So the problem is very dramatic. So we created the software in order to create a cost-efficient collection, because in our business it's all about truck time. It's all about windshield time. You need to be able to get out and collect your material. Just
If it's worth $700 a ton, why don't you, or have anyone experienced like paying for it?
well, and that's part of our partnership, and we'll go through the last slide. As a part of our participation with the community, we're sending 10% of the value that we collect back to the community. And we're not talking about, tens of thousands of dollars. We're talking about small amounts of dollars, but it's still better than paying for. When you couple it with your landfill disposal fees,
Right.
plus depending on how you're handling your electronics, there might be fees that are associated with to the community for hosting the electronics program. We have inventory management system within the program, and then build our relationships with the markets. This is generally where I'm able to walk people through how the system actually works. It's pretty simple. We start out, you text pickup. You get an automatic response because we're using text bots, so it's all automated. We ask for your name and number. We ask for your address in order to confirm that you're actually in our community. And if you're not in our community, then we contact the folks and see if we can get into the community, if they're interested in helping us get into the community. Then we simply ask for the name. And one of the key components of the system is we ask you to take photographs of some of the items that you're recycling. Why is that important? In order to be disruptive in the market, today all clothing is purchased sight unseen. So I call it storage war fashion. You have all these people standing in front of the storage unit, they're bidding on it, you roll it up, it's full of garbage, you roll it up, it has a Bentley in it. Well, right now, clothing is purchased, they're buying a black bag. They don't know whether it's got socks and underwear in it, or if it has items of higher value. So we're trying to insert transparency into that system, and you can imagine what the conversation is with folks who are purchasing clothing. One conversation is, I have 20,000 pounds of clothing, what's it worth? $700 a ton. The second conversation is, I have 20,000 pounds of clothing, and I know there's 300 X, 200 Y, and 100 Z. Now we've raised their confidence level on the value of what's in there, so maybe now that shipment of clothing is worth $1,000 a ton.
Where does the clothing go?
Well, there's folks who purchase clothing, and what they actually do is much like sorting the paper bottles and cans, except they sort it down to 400 grades.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the hierarchy of where clothing goes, 5% goes into vintage stores, which would be higher end used clothing stores. 55% goes into thrifts or sold internationally as used clothing. 30% gets repurposed into another item like high-tech wipers or rags, or it could be automobile insulation. If you lift the carpet up on your car, you see that multicolored.
Sure.
That's actually clothing because it has superior sound buffering properties. And then about 10% ends up in landfill. That is just items that can't be used. One of the things that we're doing, and we're being funded by a group called the Closed Loop Fund. And what Closed Loop's mission is to drive post-consumer recycling. Closed Loop Partners. There's Closed Loop Partners, funds, venture. We come in under venture. So we're being incubated by Closed Loop. Closed Loop has convinced a lot of major brands to invest in post-consumer recycling. Includes like Coke, Pepsi, Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, Walmart, Target, and they've all ponied up. The first round was $100 million. The next round is going to be significantly more than that. And so the whole idea is to invest in post-consumer recycling in order to solve problems where traditional investment is hard to get a hold of. So you can imagine how hard it is for an emerging company to find financial support from traditional markets given how volatile commodity markets are. So they're really offering that, they're trying to solve problems in that space. For example, one of the initiatives is an ocean program to clean up the oceans. So one of the other investments for Closed Loop is a company called Radnor, which can take old cotton material, regenerate it into thread, and make a brand new cotton garment. Now that's a game changer, right? Because now you're not just trying to sell material as used clothing or rags or whatever. Now you're actually making new clothing out of old clothing. So it's an integrated investment in that, Closed Loop has decided that Evernew is going to need feedstock. So if you have a company like Curb My Clutter, you've got some synergistic effects there. This walks through the registration process. So
Do you have a minimum pickup?
no. No, generally what we're doing right now is we come into the community once a week, and we're dovetailing communities together. So we just started in Lower Merion in August. They were our first Pennsylvania community. We've got Springfield, Montgomery County just passed a resolution. We'll be starting in Springfield. Most of our communities right now are in New Jersey. So through the process, after you take a couple pictures, if you want to receive rewards, you take pictures. If you don't want to take pictures, you can move straight to the end and just get your collection. So in order to change behavior, we figured we needed a rewards program in order to incentivize people to take that extra step. But frankly, today, people are taking pictures of just about everything, right? Their lunches, their dinners, their all kind of stuff. So to ask somebody to take a couple pictures isn't really a big step. But there is a rewards program. And as a part of that rewards program, we also partner with the township to say, okay, are there groups within the township, whether it's the PTO, PTA, if it's the environmental group or whoever, that a resident could actually donate their rewards to an organization rather than take the rewards for themselves. And we've seen about 30% of the people actually donate their rewards.
You haven't tried or encouraged drop-off of clothing?
Well, and that's part of the problem with the drop-off. There's a couple issues with the drop-off. My friends who are in the drop-off business, those collection bins become magnets for illegal dumping. A lot of communities are really pushing back on them. Some of the donation companies like Goodwill and Green Drop, they're all going to man drop-offs because 40% of what's in that bin is trash. And so they're going around and they're picking up clothing, but they're also picking up trash. So a lot of communities are really pushing against those. And, when you think about all of the household services that are happening today, there's grocery delivery and Peapod, and there's a lot of household deliveries that are out there. And so if we get the right critical mass, there's enough revenue to be able to support the collection system. 2 days before the collection, so after you actually get your collection, 2 days before, we send a reminder saying, hey, don't forget, we're going to be here in 2 days. And then the day of, you get another reminder message. Because again, of course, wanting to be efficient and effective, we want to make sure that if you're going to the person's house, the material's there. In terms of electronics, and I skipped ahead on my slides, one of the real big issues out there, right, is identity theft. And so a lot of people don't want to move their electronics because, frankly, they're afraid it's got their personal information on it. I don't want to take it to a public drop-off. I don't want to leave it somewhere where, I don't know what's happening to it. So one of our features is you can have us ring your doorbell. We'll come to when we come for your pickup, we'll ring your doorbell. We'll take your electronics from you directly and put it in our truck so that you have confidence that that personal information isn't going to end up where it doesn't belong. Additionally, our name is Curb My Clutter, but we actually don't pick up at the curb. I don't want the material at the curb. We do what I call UPS style, which is we're going up to the house, either at the porch or the garage, and that's where you want to pick the material up. If you're putting material out at the curb, particularly if it's a computer, it's not going to be there by the time we get there. So we don't, we don't want the material at the curb. After the pickup, we do a survey to make sure that everything went as planned. This would be an example of the rewards. So when we do rewards, right now we're doing a $10 Amazon gift card. It's all, again, done through your smartphone. So you get a text that says, here's your reward, here's how to redeem it. If you have residents who don't text, because let's face it, not everybody is using a smartphone, if you call the number that we assign to the community, you'll get a message that says, if you have the ability to text, please hang up and text pickup too. If you don't have the ability to text, leave your name and number and we'll get back to you. So then we'll call the folks and schedule the collection with them over the phone. So the way it works is we publish a number specific to Radnor Township, and the entire system runs through Radnor Township. What we do under the pilot program is we customize our software to Radnor Township. We handle all of the scheduling and program administration. We handle all customer service requests. So it's basically soup to nuts. We create co-branded advertising in order to promote the program. And we promote the community engagement with religious, educational, civic organizations. What we've been doing also is hiring a local champion. So for 5 or 10 hours a week, they're actually attending meetings or talking with people about the program to try to drive the program. What we ask of the community is to promote the program through your existing community engagement channels. So we're not asking you to do anything that you're not doing already, such as your web page, newsletters, any kind of other community engagement that you have. You receive a revenue share payment from Curb My Clutter, 10% of what we sell. You retain 100% of the disposal avoidance and plus any savings that you would have on electronics. The one thing that I haven't mentioned is in terms of TV collection, TVs are a problem. It's usually what people think about in terms of electronics. There is a convenience fee for picking up TVs. If it's a standard size TV, it's $35. If it's one of the big monster TVs that you're talking about, it's $100. So we do take all. And that's at the option of the resident. So they can either choose to have us do the collection or wait until there's a drop-off and maybe pay $50, whatever, to take it to a drop-off.
Or just throw it in the landfill.
Okay.
Which is illegal. Which is what they do.
Yeah. Or leave it on a back road somewhere.
Right.
Who does the electronics recycling? Who do you sell those to? 'Cause understanding is that a lot of that historically has gone overseas. Like, is
So we use R2 certified recycler. The folks that we're currently using are located in New Jersey. But as one of the main things that is very important to us is, because we're tied to a larger organization, being the closed loop, we certainly don't want to do anything that would impair the good name that they've built. So, we're absolutely, everything will be done the way it needs to be done.
So just as a question, there doesn't really seem to be a downside to the community at all. So is the onboarding process pretty simple?
Yeah, we have an agreement that we put forth, which pretty much spells out everything that I just outlined. It usually takes us 30 to 45 days in order to get the software up and running, get the materials printed. We usually start introducing the program through door hanger, which it's kind of old school. In the back of this, I have some of the engagement that we have.
Is this having a bad effect on like Goodwill and some of the places that,
Well,
like I always bring my clothing to.
it's interesting because before I joined Curb My Club, being in the environmental field, I said, who's throws clothing
People
away?
give it all the Purple Heart.
Everybody donates their clothing,
Yeah.
right? Reality is that being environmentally conscious, like I'm sure people in this room are not throwing their clothing away. I'm sure they are donating. And we're not looking to impact the donation market. If you're socially motivated to donate and you want to donate, please donate. We're looking to impact the 85% that are going in the landfill. We really want to, our whole mission is to try to keep those materials out of the landfill. So, in the communities that that we have rolled out in, we haven't had any pushback or any concern that we've been impacted in the donation market. I mean, there's a chance that we would. I mean, I wouldn't sit up here and say we're not. We don't offer any kind of tax receipts or anything for someone. We are, in theory, a for-profit company, social enterprise, actually driving materials out of the landfill are more important to us than worrying about whether, where the bottom line is.
You have to have a custody exchange with the actual homeowner then? In other words, they have to be there?
No.
Well, then-
No, only if it's somebody who has cell phones, laptops, that type of material that they don't want to leave outside on their porch, and they choose for us to ring their doorbell, then we actually have an exchange with the resident. If not, they can leave it out on the porch just like they do with, the UPS packages.
Bob, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Just one quick question. Not asking you to disclose anything, financially about what you're doing, but I'm just trying to understand, like Lower Merion, like how much of this stuff happens, say a week? Like how many trucks do you have driving around all day? That there's this much stuff that people are.
I mean, right now,
unloading.
we're ramping up. So this week, we've collected 10 stops. So it's not multiple trucks. It's one truck. And, it's a real high probability that we could pick Radnor up on the same day that we pick Lower Merion. Now, people don't generate these types of materials at the same frequency they do other materials. So it's not as truck intensive as you would see for other.
So you might have some crazy weeks and then some slow weeks. Just trying to get a sense of the scale of it.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, during the summer, it was really slow. People go on vacation, holidays.
But also, you just started there, so the idea is that the word gets out.
And it starts to grow.
And sort of the feel-goodness about it grows.
The municipality you've done the longest is Gloucester County?
No, the longest is Woolwich, New Jersey, which is in South Jersey. It's 4,000 households, and we've collected about 10 tons since February.
you drive by it on the back way out of the shore,
Yeah,
or through it.
if you're going down 322,
If folks have follow-up questions, are you open to?
my card's in the packet.
Saw that, thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
you're
that.
more than happy to reach out to me. Email,
Mhm.
phone call, text.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. This is really
Thank
cool.
you.
Interesting.
Really interesting,
Who's
yeah.
who's your key contact in Lower Merion?
Well, I deal with Joe, and I know I'm going to destroy his name, Prespizewski, but I've also dealt with Ernie McNeely, who's the township manager.
Great.
Great.
We're running up against our time here. Real quick, any concerns about the minutes from last month?
Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. No?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, done. So we're good on that. One announcement on my side, there's an EAC summit in Haverford. I sent an announcement out. They're looking for RSVPs by tomorrow, I believe.
When is it again?
It is in October, I believe the 17th.
Wednesday the 7th.
Wednesday the 17th. I'd kind of like to go. It may be a little bit challenging from a scheduling perspective. If others want to go, I would certainly encourage it. I think having 1 or 2 people there would be a great idea, if anyone's interested. Okay.
Is the what you sent out have all the details?
It has all the details, and I will RSVP. If folks want to just send me a note and say I'm in or I'm out, then I can just take a tally and let them know how many people
Could
are
you
coming.
explain just a little bit what this is?
Yeah, so there was, you might not have been on this initial email, I apologize. So the Haverford EAC for the last couple of years has been doing a summit where EACs from around the area have come together.
Okay.
Last one, I think Ron went to, I went to one before that. Dan might have gone to one as well, right? You know, they had a little food and we sat and talked about all the issues that EACs are dealing with and kind of traded ideas and shared solutions and stuff like that. I found it fascinating because a lot of these same issues are coming up, and we talk about, you know, stormwater management, you know, dealing with stuff from Tredyffrin, from other areas. Those guys are all there, so you know we can have that conversation if we want to. So I think it's a good way to really find out what's happening.
Yeah, I'll probably do that.
Great.
Because I'm going to miss
Thank
the
you.
October hour meeting in
Okay,
October.
and you have a conflict as well. And by the way, I'm happy to reschedule October's meeting if you guys want to. I just haven't done it because I know it's hard to coordinate that if we have conflicts.
Because it would be, what, the 25th?
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, because I'll be away.
Okay.
About a whole week.
Yeah, so we may not, well, we may just have a quorum if that's the case, if Colleen's going to make it. Yeah.
Straw poll. Who likes the 7 p.m. time?
I do too. That sounds great. Okay, let's do it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good
I
idea.
mentioned it on the way in.
Yeah,
This is
okay.
great.
I will communicate that to the township.
When did it used to be?
Used to be
It's
6,
usually
and that's a little
Yeah,
tight.
6 is a little early.
Yeah, coming home from work, it's hard to get here on time. Okay, great idea, thank you. And I'll get nameplates for those that don't have them yet. Margie, do you want to give us a 20-second blurb on yourself?
Yeah, so I was just at John Hines at Tinicum today taking my students on a field trip. So I came into this interest actually by teaching. And one of the things I have my students do is they have to put together a project that they would initiate something that would be of benefit to the local community. And then I'm thinking, well, what do I do? So I thought that I might participate in my local community, and that's really where I got. And then I saw there was an opening.
Yeah.
So that's where my interest came from, to finally do what I'm telling my students to do.
And where are you
yeah.
teacher again? If you could
University
talk-
of the Sciences
Okay.
in Philadelphia. Yeah.
And you teach biology?
Biology, yeah. And this is a global sustainability course, but we took a field trip today to John Hines just to see some diversity, and they do some not climate change mitigation, but they gather data, and so one of our topics is climate change, so that was
Yeah.
of interest as well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're glad to have you, and your expertise is going to be a great addition to the group, so thank you. Do you guys want to talk about the curb my clutter thing? Is there any, any concern? Do you want to take that up by email? I want to get a report back to the BOC mid-October, so, and I think that could just be a couple of paragraphs saying great or saying here are our concerns. Skip?
Well, since Lower Merion abuts Radnor, I'm wondering if he'd be willing to do a trial program using the Lower Merion call number.
Interesting idea.
And you could test it without going through the full boat marketing thing.
Well, it doesn't sound like there's any cost to us to do it anyway, so.
Well, I mean, it
Either
just,
way.
in other words, if they could report what that run generated, that's part of what you tell the township manager.
Yeah, we could propose it,
If
and
we picked up 2 tons of solid waste, and we might get $50 back next
Right,
month.
right.
You know.
yeah.
But if it's not fully advertised, then how do people know to call the
Well,
pickup number?
that's, yeah, you have to go through maybe the schools or something like
Well,
that.
and I don't know how many of you are on the neighborhood little websites, the next door neighborhood.
Yeah.
You on
Yeah.
the little.
Right.
You can advertise through there.
Yeah.
I think
Not
the only risk
everybody's
is
on it.
if it turns out to be terrible for some reason. I know I've had issues with curbside pickups where they don't show. And if the township pushes something, they promote it, and it's a lemon, it's going to look bad, but it doesn't really cost anything.
Right.
So it's not really, there's not really a risk.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Well, he-
But I'd want to get at least some, we talk about the potential impact of the charitable donations. He said he doesn't see that, maybe it's not detectable yet or something, but at least from a perception standpoint, when one of these organizations to complain to the township and say you're promoting something that,
Well, the other thing he
cuts
said
out
is they
charities.
only had 10 pickups, I think, last
Yeah.
week or
Yeah.
whatever. So maybe they have to get a little further along before we hire them.
maybe.
Yeah, that was a little smart.
I mean, I just
They
find
can't be
I find it
making
incredible
money
to
if
think
they're
that 15%
paying
of
someone to
homes
drive
are
vehicle
donated
around.
and 85% are actually just
10
thrown
bags of
away.
plastics.
That is remarkable.
I mean, unless the T-shirt is horribly, ripped or stained or something, I wouldn't even dream of throwing it away.
Right.
Well, and, not to dig too deep into it, but you never know what the overlap is. I mean, of the 32 billion tons, how much of that is controlled by people that have a smartphone or a telephone that are interested, and it's not all of that market.
Yeah.
But I support the cause, and there's not too many risks, but a couple things I think we want to make sure.
Well, I know on the electronics front, that's just the cost savings. There's no conventional way of getting rid of your e-waste without paying to do it at a county event or something.
I guess Best Buy doesn't take it anymore.
I don't know. Mom's did a collection a while ago, but I don't remember.
TVs, you do have to pay a fee for at Best Buy. Now, the township last year did a recycling event on site where you could drop off a TV for free.
Oh, really?
So we'd be giving that up.
They're having,
Well, I'm
the
sure it
township's,
costs money,
it's actually should be in our notes, October 20th is
Yep.
anything with a plug drop off here.
Oh,
is it?
All right, thank you for raising that.
I mean, I imagine those events are expensive. The township pays for that, right? I mean, those
Yeah.
have to go somewhere.
Yep.
So if I would bet that if these guys end up taking 100% of electronic waste, you would get no complaints from the township. They probably love
Yeah,
that.
I think that's true.
I think as you say, actually, it's still up there, right? 100% of any e-waste savings from reduced traffic at electronics
Right.
drop off and events. Like,
Well, he's just saying you're going to.
You get
There's not going to be as much
benefit.
traffic there for you to deal
Yeah,
with.
we'd love that.
Not as much to take away.
Right. That makes sense. Well, those are good things to raise, and I would ask folks to just email me with anything else that you want to talk about in terms of evaluating the program, and I'll get that over to Commissioner Abel, who set this up.
Were you going to call the people at Lower Merion to ask them their opinion of it so far? Or, just by virtue of getting their names?
I was thinking about it.
Okay.
And if you want to do that, I think it'd be a good step, but it's really voluntary. It's up to you.
If they're just in it.
And, as far as I'm concerned, our commitment at this point is just to report back to the BOC and say this is what we thought.
Right.
And-
Sometimes you don't want to get an answer that you don't want. Like, I think if they're only doing 10 pickups a week,
Yeah,
Lower Merion isn't in love yet.
yeah.
Well, right.
And,
maybe.
yeah.
I wonder what kind of commitment we have to ask about that. I guess we could still ask. If we sign up and they don't get the participation they're hoping for, they're going to bail,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden, that's we
Right.
promote this thing that's no longer.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think your point too about what happens to the electronics, I don't think I heard a solid answer on that.
Yeah, something about R2, the R2, I think that's why it's so difficult to get rid of electronics, because it's not really that profitable to do anything with them.
They're not gonna pick them up for free, so that then they can pay to throw them away somewhere.
Yeah.
They have some sort of
Fair
profitable use for them.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It is a business, even if it's not highly for profit.
Yeah, it's a startup. So
Right. Well, no.
Sometimes startups don't make money.
That's true, a lot of times.
But with their pictures, they're gonna have a good labeled data set for a machine learning tool to figure out what's in people's houses. That'll be fun. All right.
Okay.
Well, good. Thanks, everybody. Any other issues, questions, new business?
You know what, one update actually on sustainable PA.
Mhm.
So,
Oh, yeah,
I wasn't here
thank you.
last month. So we did get, so we submitted, right, our silver level of stuff and information. I got a report back with a fair amount of feedback, we'll call it. And basically what I went through is I tried to just address all the feedback. So it was things like, can you point out the page number that you promote shade trees, you know, or whatever, things like that. Fair enough, fine. It was a little tedious, so it took a couple hours, but so I resubmitted all that on the form on the website. They said that the next step would be to email them, and they, you know, you don't resubmit it, they kind of just go back and look at it all. Probably the two biggest, so I think that we're fine to do this, and I think it'll still be in the silver range. Where we lost points, probably the two bits of feedback we're learning is number one, freshness of data. A lot of our links and stuff were a little bit old, or, you know, or some of our newsletters that we've used had kind of died out in the past couple of years. And probably the highlight of this, the oldness or staleness, was there's a whole section on a comprehensive plan. And we have a comprehensive plan, but it's from 2003. And they said it really needs to be in the last 10 years to be considered.
Comprehensive plan for?
It's really for like land use and really the township, you know, it's like a master plan.
Gotcha.
The last one we have is 2003. What I did is I got some links. I kind of couldn't refute that. Yes, that's true. And I couldn't find anything more recent than that core one. It seemed like a really robust thing that was done, but 15 years ago. I did find a couple things that were maybe like an update to some of the land use and planning stuff from 2013. I put in some of those links.
Yeah, we had like the Greenway plan was put together.
Yeah, so I think there's things that kind of come close, but you know, we'll see how we do, I guess. But I think we're on track in the sense that we wanted to submit, see what we get feedback. We got the feedback. It is, I wouldn't say it's easy just to jump to gold or platinum. Like,
right.
It's pretty tedious to provide all this information. So unless anybody has any objections, I'll just email them saying we resubmitted, addressed everything. You're right, we don't have an updated master, you know, plan. But
Maybe what I call
Still a good
call
plan.
Township. I don't know, Melissa Kahn, maybe would be
Yeah.
someone to call. Just say, you know, is there anything on the radar that we're going to get one in 2 years or something like that? You know.
Who, as far as I know.
Melissa Kahn, I think. I don't know if anyone knows
Who
anyone
does
better.
that? I mean, who would be the one to initiate that?
Well, the township, you know, the BOC, I think, would decide we need a new comprehensive plan, and we'd hire some consultant, a land use planner to do it.
Or just update it and give it a new date.
New cover.
So that's the status of sustainable, so I'll resubmit, and hopefully we'll have a little printout of a certification plaque or something that says we're silver level certified.
That's great. Thank you for that work. I appreciate it. Nice job getting that through. I think next time Colleen will probably have an update on the Radnor High School club that she's involved with around solar power. She mentioned there was some stuff bubbling around that. So we'll look forward to hearing that.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
Wawa will not be on the planning commission agenda for October.
Okay.
Is that a super
Thank
Wawa
you.
gas station roll-up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Although it'll be fewer pumps than the two combined stations are now.
Right.
And it's about 5,000 square feet.
That'll be a store and all that, like,
It'll be a big Wawa, a bigger
Great.
than average Wawa by far, plus gasoline.
So I am on one of these Nextdoor groups. If people know what that is, right? There's this Nextdoor.com, and
Yeah.
you sort of form these
I-
little nucleuses. Like
yeah.
there's one. I live on a loop street with 2 cross streets, and there's one for that. But then I'm linked to like sort of out into Berwyn and maybe Paoli. I'm not sure. And people are, you know, complaining about fireworks or upsetting their dogs, a lot of that kind of annoying stuff. But there's a lot of, there is sort of a little Craigslist-y kind of thing going on. And then, so interesting, just today, I happened to open it and there was a link to Stop the Super Wawa. And I clicked on that and it was like, this link has been removed or something. So it's kind of interesting that someone kind of put this thing out there and then retracted it
Just take
somehow.
a picture, and I was talking to Steve,
Well, I
you
think it was
may have
like
heard it. The current site is 98% impervious now anyway.
With gas and oil dripping
It's
all over
gas and
it.
oil and
Yeah.
a car wash.
Yeah.
So you have traffic, you have, activity all day.
So what
I
spot
don't
is
know
it
why we
going
have to have
into?
3 Wawas in Wayne.
I know.
It's right, do you know what's the church there, the big church on the
St.
corner? St.
Catherine's.
Catherine's.
Yeah.
It's
Aberdeen and
Just
Lancaster.
further east.
Do you know where the
East
CVS
on.
is, which you might call the St. David
Right.
CVS?
Yeah.
It's right next to that. The 2 gas stations.
Andrew,
On that side.
anything on plastic bags and straws? I know we had a couple, you
Yeah,
must have had some interesting conversations.
So yeah, I have. What's amazing, and maybe not that surprising, is that businesses that have a financial vested interest in the outcome are very quick to return your phone calls and to find you proactively, but environmental groups who want to solve the problem aren't. So I've actually had a conversation with the Pennsylvania Association of
Straw makers.
like food
Markets
retailers and
Yeah.
convenience stores and restaurants, like big consumers of plastic bags, who said that they would be opposed to and would fight against anything that included an outright ban, but they didn't seem so opposed or have much of a problem with like a bag tax.
Okay.
And then I played phone tag with no, I did talk to the guy, the Pennsylvania Plastics Industry Manufacturers
Alex?
Group. Yeah, Alex.
Alex below.
And he sent me information sheets of studies that they had that suggest that I didn't bring it with me, but 70% of plastic bags are actually recycled or reused. So apparently, a lot of people use them as trash can liners and stuff like that, and 1 to 2% end up in waterways, and basically saying that this is not really such a huge environmental problem, and you should focus on other things. So, I'm still trying to gather some information from the side that's opposed to bags, but other than posting things online and telling you to call your senators and stuff, they don't really publish a lot of scientific information.
I use them as trash liners,
I
but
do
they're
too.
ending up in the landfill. I don't know if
But then
that's.
we're-
Well, but
Yeah,
you're
a trash
you're
bag would
getting
end up
a
in the
second
landfill
use,
anyway, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or else you have to buy the plastic bag.
Yeah.
Well, but that's the point. Like, either you're using a regular trash bag or you're using the Wawa bag. Like, what's the
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah.
So, to that extent, if you're actually using it, but I think the problem is when they're ending up in streams and the ocean and as litter and stuff like that. So, I'm still trying to get good information together.
Okay,
but-
and it sounds like on the solution side, it's a little bit thin, and maybe we just need to kind of keep digging on this a little bit to see
Yeah.
if there's something we can propose.
Can I just ask, why is there, if there's not much of an opposition to a tax that would kind of curb it,
Right.
sort of discourages use, but there is a lot of opposition for a ban? I'm not sure, how does that economically negatively impact the?
I think a ban would be a big problem for a lot of people. I mean, if all of a sudden Acme couldn't use plastic bags, they'd be in trouble.
So is that what the supermarket lobby?
The
feels
supermarket,
that-
convenience store, trade groups thought a ban was really a problem, whereas a tax they didn't seem to have a big problem with.
Well, where
I think the
how
residents
would
would have a problem with the tax.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Maybe that's why they know that a tax is more politically
Yeah.
problematic.
Yeah.
Skip?
But look at Whole Foods, no plastic bag.
Right.
You come in with a plastic bag that's reusable, you get a nickel.
Yep.
You can either donate to charity or keep the nickel.
And Aldi, I don't know if you've been to an Aldi yet, but there's one on City Line Avenue. They don't give
They
you
don't have
bags
any
at all.
bags. I
There's
know.
no
I
bags in
discovered
the
that
store. You
once.
either bring your own bag or you buy them
Right.
while you're there. I mean, it's clearly, there's models for it. It's just,
Interesting, yeah.
and then you go to Gennardi's and, Gennardi's, that's dating myself. You go to Giant and you wind up in the wrong lane, and it's the plastic bag carousel when you get like one article of something per bag, and you wind up with 72 bags when you leave the store. It's like
Yeah.
the stupidest thing I've ever seen.
And Aldi
but-
is in a lower income area, so it's interesting that.
Well, the
you know,
tax means more to them, so they're less apt to just pay it.
Yeah, but, you know, that can be done.
Right.
We really don't.
Oh, yeah, there's no-
Bags,
Well, I'm with you though. I think that we shouldn't let it die, and maybe there's just with some more data we can construct a winning kind of.
Yeah. I'm
approach.
honestly confused. Like, I'm sure that plastic bags are cheaper than paper bags for the stores, but when you factor in how much you can fit in a paper bag versus how little you get in a plastic bag, is one paper bag really 5 times more expensive than one plastic bag? Because it feels to me that that's sort of the ratio that I don't know. I don't understand the economics of it. And
I'm sure there's an answer out there. I imagine somebody made that decision for the grocery store at some
Sure,
point.
sure. But the bottom line is even a small tax would tip the scale. And if you didn't make it a consumer-facing tax, you just made it a tax on the store, then you wouldn't have a backlash necessarily from the
Right.
consumer.
Then it drives change without.
Sort of like the business privilege tax, like, nobody's passing the business privilege tax on to the consumer. They're
It
just
comes
eating
full
it.
circle that then that, if you apply it that way, which
Yeah.
I agree with, then probably the store lobbies would be least happy with that.
Well, either
No,
that, or
you think so?
they would promote people to bring their own, or use, or they would make the paper bags more prominently displayed. Like, hey, would you like paper? Unless they specifically ask for plastic or something like that.
I'm not sure there's much public outcry for this in general.
There isn't.
Like, it would be a really difficult thing because
Yeah.
someone's paying for it.
You know what it takes is, it seems like it takes the Whole Foods or somebody else that says, hey, I'm willing to lose a couple of cents to promote something I think is more important.
Yeah.
Right.
And it doesn't feel like the lobby is necessarily there.
So maybe we should talk to the students at the high school about picketing in front of Acme, because that's probably way more effective
It probably is.
than putting a 1 cent per bag tax on it. I mean, in terms of a solution to the problem. You know?
Yeah,
I think
please
we should
take
continue.
Or maybe just someone talking to them. Did anyone ever try?
Right,
you
right.
know?
Oh, I'm sure environmental groups have tried, but I don't know that those decisions get made at the local store level anyway. They're probably made at national level. So I'm still digging.
Well, more to come. That's great. Thank you for updating us. Okay,
Sure.
I think we're done. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Cool.
Which
I got a call.